I want to encourage you guys to log into the online meeting because we noticed that the font for people in the room is really hard to read. And we didn't redo our slides to take off all the smaller font. So really do encourage you to log in so that you don't have to strain and not get some of the content. We also would like for you to take a survey. So you can scan the code here and it's super short, maybe take you 3 minutes. Y'all can multitask while I talk. Um, you know, it'll ooze in through osmosis. To get started, we wanted to introduce ourselves. Saw a lot of new faces at this conference, which is really exciting. So welcome to anybody who it's their first time from public or private sector. We're glad you're with us now. So I'm Susan Miller. I'm the Geospatial Information Officer for the state of Georgia. And over here is Natalie Lee, my much better half. And she is building programs for all of our framework data in Georgia. So she is a magical unicorn and I love her to death. So that's the two of us. You are now fully invested in the entirety of the Georgia Geospatial Information Office. It's just us. And Natalie came on to the team 1 week before COVID did. So she has just been amazing throughout all of COVID. She came on to help build programs in support of Next Gen 911, but immediately took on and embraced COVID like you would not believe. And we're going to show off some of that in just a minute. So I wanted to give you kind of an agenda so that you can easily follow along with what we're going to talk about today. She's going to talk about some of the tech that we use to engage our workforce and what worked and what didn't. And we hope to leave enough time, except I'm super long-winded, so we're not counting on it, to have an open discussion with y'all, because we really want to hear about what you did that worked well and what you absolutely hated. I think there's a lot of lessons that we can all share with each other. So first off, again, you get me. I'm going to talk about us, stuff about us, and how that stuff channels what we do every single day. So I'm going to start off with the reality that we wake up with every morning, which is that under normal non-global pandemic times, data operations in Georgia is a dumpster fire. And then COVID happened. And it became even harder because we couldn't interface with our humans. And the humans in Georgia are not connected. They are not connected. They are siloed. And it's really, really sad. So everything got a ton harder. But despite the fact that we're dealing with data operations that look like the image on this slide, and the fact that COVID came, Natalie and I work like banshees every single day. And we do that, the way we fight is through our mission and vision. And I'm not going to talk about the mission and vision language at all, other than to say that we know that our usefulness is in empowering every level of government in Georgia to utilize the amazing discipline that we all champion, geospatial sciences and the technologies that enable them. And if we can do that, there is no way that our government won't innovate. And when they do that, and when they embrace geospatial resources, they will become more efficient and effective. So essentially our job, and all of the public sector folks in here, it's y'all's job too, just not in Georgia, is to spatially enable our government, right? It's all about unlocking data from data jail. It sits in rows and columns and databases and spreadsheets, and we want to bring it to life and enable it to allow us to make better decisions. And I really want to take a moment to stress how important our NISJIG family is to us. We hope to be kind of best practices based on all of the lessons learned from NISJIG. You guys have all done most of the stuff that we're doing. You've already done it. You've done an amazing job, and you're very open and honest with us about what you would never, ever do again and what you would absolutely do again. And we are sponges. We listen to you, and everything that we do every day is based on the knowledge that you have shared with us. We would be lost without both our public and private sector family members from our NISJIG family. So I really want you to absorb that and hear that. So our work falls into 3 priority areas. We enable facilitated collaboration, whether that's collaboration among the humans or using technology, right? So we build infrastructure and we provide that for others to use. So it's collaboration with the humans and the technology. We build Georgia base maps, and then we provide geospatial services. And through COVID, this was our shining star. And by shining star, I mean her. We were idea fairies. We dealt with people who had no clue what geospatial sciences could bring to the table for COVID. They really didn't, which is sad because it's a spatial and temporal issue, right? And so we had to go in with something in hand to show them what could be done, because they just couldn't get it. If you said the words, they needed to see it. And that was really part of our greatest success during COVID. So our outreach style was didn't change much during COVID. When we meet with executive leadership from agencies, we generally walk in there and say, okay, what keeps you up at night? And secretly we're saying, because we know we can fix it. We ask them if they're willing to change and hope that they say yes. And then we ask who needs to be involved. And this is fun because they give us their opinion, and then we say respectfully, we also want to talk to your staff. We want to know what their opinion is about who needs to be involved. And inevitably, those are radically different groups of people. And so then we work to reconcile that. And we're very strong about that. We're kind of demanding about it. So I want to just go into this really fast story about COVID and show you 2 of our greatest successes and then 2 failures. And those failures were didn't work not because they weren't great, because they were. It was because of the lack of commitment of leadership to change, to do things differently. So I want to tell you the origin story of how we became the leaders of the data task force for COVID for Georgia. We were at the conference in Albuquerque. It was Natalie's first week on the job. And then after the conference, I went on a ski trip with many of the GIOs and private sector partners in the room. And they were all getting calls and emails and saying, oh, we need to go home. I remember Frank was like, hey, there's this thing happening in New York and I should probably get there. And I remember being envious and thinking, gosh, I hope someday I can be like all these people and be considered a great asset that my government would turn to and ask for help. And so then I skied. And then 2 weeks after COVID kind of became a thing in Georgia, Natalie texted me on a Sunday and she said, you have to read this email right now. And I read it, and it was this guy claiming to be a general in the National Guard, and he needed somebody to run the CHIME model. For the University of Pennsylvania. Could we do it? Could we do it that week? If we couldn't, we were dead to him and he was moving on to find somebody else. And being the good security steward that I am, I looked and saw it came from a Comcast account. And I was like, this is crap. This is not real. And she said, are you sure? And I said, okay, fine, I'll Google him. And I Googled him, and it turns out he was real. And so we met with him that next morning on Monday morning. And by Monday afternoon, we had trained ourselves up on the CHIME model that Esri had released 3 days earlier, which was amazing timing. We asked him, we used some fake data and we learned how to use it. And then we showed it to him and we said, get us the real data. And he did. And we ran it for him. We did a few other projects that week. And in week 2 of our relationship with this general, he announced to the governor's office that we were now in charge of developing and running the data task force for COVID for the state. And that is our origin story. It was very bizarre. So we immediately reached out to the people that we knew. Natalie has amazing connections. I do not. I already knew people in a few state agencies, key players, like the Georgia Emergency Management uh, Agency, also our Department of Community Affairs, and our Georgia Technology Authority. That's our IT state agency. So I reached out to them, and Natalie started reaching out to other people. Our general reached out to other people, and our team grew to be this. I think that I know it's hard to read, so I want to just point out over on the bottom left section. One of the things that I think made us unique was we had a amazing modeling team. And I want to really stress that these people were all volunteer. People came to us and said, we want to help. We want to help. What can we do? And we had a modeling team. Every day we ran the IHME model. We also ran the CHIME model. And then we had scientists from a company called IEM, which was a private company, MIT, Georgia Tech, and also Emory University. We had amazing, brilliant epidemiologists and data scientists from those groups. And every single day, they ran their respective models for us based off the data that we were able to secure for them. So we broke our team into 3 components, and it was wildly successful. We took our team that ranged in size from anywhere from 3 to 30 people at any given day. We broke them into our data and analytics team, our modeling team, which again was an incredibly unique group. It was really powerful. And then we had a visualization and application development team. And we didn't realize in the beginning, but we realized a moment after we started that communications and cartography was paramount to what we were doing. And so we engaged amazing people like Amber Schmidtke. I don't know if any of you follow her. She was on our team. She analyzed everything that we wrote and published, and she made sure that it would be consumable by a 5th grader. We had amazing contributions from Esri and other groups on cartography, and we're unbelievably thoughtful about the cartography that went out. Now, you all don't know that because the cartography that went out through the Department of Public Health in the beginning was atrocious. And it was in the news constantly. And it was the big reason that we learned we wanted to do something very, very different. But we aimed to build a community of respect and kind of create the tone for the entire team and really create a safe space for people to work fast, to fail, to learn, and to move on. And Frank alluded to this earlier. We really rode a wave in the shift of the way people think in a crisis. And I think this is key to why we were successful. You know, there's a real shift in the way people think and the way people work during a crisis. And if you can leverage that and get on that wave, it's amazing. And so to boil it down, we really focused on uniting around a purpose. All of that brain trust that came in had a massive spike in energy for our workforce. We were centered on one problem all together, and the wellspring of new ideas that came from them was outstanding. Number 3, seeing the process and systems differently. There is nothing like a crisis to shine a huge spotlight on where your processes are horrific, right? Where are things broken? And they come out. And we were able to gently tell people that their processes are broken and that we had a solution. And when people were willing to embrace that, they were successful. When they didn't, they floundered. And then the unfreezing of organizations, the courage to take action. Again, that was something that Frank alluded to this morning. And we saw that. We saw a lot of stagnation and people unwilling to change. And they are still in the same place today that they were a year ago. So just to kind of walk you through a goal that we had was data governance. And I am quoting the great Frank Winters here, that data governance creates trust, which is the currency that makes data sharing possible. And Frank, I'd like you to notice that I gave you a title. So you can take that now. So essentially, we're not going to go into details on this. We were coordinators. We found the right humans. We got them playing in the sandbox together. We built ecosystems for technology, for GIS, for data. We built ecosystems for communication and collaborations for the humans. We went out and found the data. We enabled data movement. We interrogated the data. We had amazing data scientists from Georgia Tech. It just blew my mind. And another really key thing that we did was automation. We automated anything that could be automated. We grabbed data, we moved data around, we changed formats of data. We did daily rollups, cumulative rollups, and surprising to us, people weren't doing those. They weren't doing daily rollups. They weren't doing cumulative rollups. And if they were doing it by hand and doing copy paste. We generated reports that people were spending 4 hours a day creating for the governor's office, and we automated that. Boom, 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 freeing up their minds to do amazing work. And then really important, we did health checks on all of that automation every single day to have touch points with all of our clients to say, everything's looking good, or oops, there's a problem with a data flow somewhere. We solved problems, we performed analytics. Again, we were the idea fairies. This is really important. People don't know what they don't know. And we did application development and cartography. So I'm going to show you 2 of our successes that we're really proud of, and then 2 of the things that were not successful, not for lack of trying. So the first one, I'm not going to go into detail at all, but we built a community hub. By the way, we had nothing. We had nothing in place in terms of technology when we started working on COVID. She had Pro on her laptop. That's it. We now have an amazing hub ecosystem. We have community hubs out the wazoo. We are so happy. And we took advantage of the private sector pushing out copious amounts of data and allowing people to use it. And we built beautiful applications. And by we brought Esri on, and they were amazing. They built applications for us for several months. And we put it all out on our data hub for everybody to use. And we're really proud of this because we didn't even ask permission to do this. We just built it and waited for somebody to come and yell at us, and they didn't. So here we are. We didn't get fired. So this one is our hospital capacity planner. So we built this for our public health agencies and the agency that's in charge of hospitals, also the association that's in charge of hospitals. They needed to know when, where, and by how much will our state's hospitals reach capacity. Both regular capacity and surge capacity for beds and ventilators. So what you're seeing in here, because I know you can't read it, is we took all 5 of the models. You remember that at the national level and then sometimes at a state level, we were seeing the IHME model and the CHIME model being run, which are the kind of polar opposites, the catastrophic and then the very, nothing's happening, we don't have a virus. And so we had those extremes, and then we had the MIT and the Georgia Tech and the Emory stuff happening in the middle. So we showed all the models at once so that a hospital planner could look at that and make more educated decisions. We showed surge and non-surge capacity for all the bed types and ventilators. Were they in use? Were they available? The exact dates on which we thought the resources would be anticipated to be exhausted. And then we reported on that by individual hospitals and by hospital regions. So that's what you're seeing in here. And one of the unforeseen benefits that we hadn't planned for was that the hospitals themselves kind of knew what was happening within their own hospitals. But what was very helpful to them in a decentralized state like Georgia is they don't go to the state to ask for help. They go to their sister hospitals within their region, and they had no clue what was happening in their sister hospitals. This gave them the tools to see that every single day. So Let's talk about two things that were not successful, and they were not for a lack of trying. We tried and we tried and we tried, and we just couldn't get people to bite. They were unwilling to change. The first one is test sites. So the map on the right shows where test sites actually were in Georgia. And the image on the bottom with the dashboard is what we proposed to the state. We said, if you were to put your workforce, your mobile workforce out into these areas, you could cover 99.8% of Georgia's population within a 30-minute drive time to a test site. And we couldn't get a bite. The people in charge just didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to change. They didn't want to do it differently, even though most of these were mobile sites. The other one that really broke our hearts, because we were most proud of this, is we built a decision support tool for schools to help them determine their opening strategies and then adjust course during the school year. And we laid out a really beautiful picture of the fact that you need to care about a lot more than just COVID data. Right? You need to care about demographic data and local health infrastructure and socioeconomic data. So we built a tool, we built a story map where we shared all of this information with them. We performed the analytics, and they just wouldn't bite. They wouldn't bite, and it broke our hearts. So I'm going to pass it over to Natalie, who's now going to take a deeper dive into some of the lessons that we learned and how we're going to carry that forward into our next Gen 911 work. Whichever one you want. You want to hold or you want to?
Does this one work? Okay. Yeah, so just one more point on that, the schools tool that we built. One of the problems that we had is that it was so decentralized, the decision to open schools, no one wanted to lead that decision. No one wanted to say, this is how you should make the decision. This is what you should consider this. So they were giving data, but nobody wanted to really take ownership of making that decision. And so we had a lot of schools that were just scrambling, and ultimately my theory is they made the decision on the gut, like what feels right, what do we think our parents and families want. So we do feel like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity for data to actually lead the decision. Okay, so I'm excited to talk to you guys about some of our lessons that we learned during COVID. And I think you guys probably, if you've done an after action report, you probably have thought about what worked and what are the things that we can carry through during COVID into our future projects. And that's what we've tried to do too, because there's a lot that applies, especially with Next Gen 911. And so before, just for people online and people in the room, how many of you are going to have some level of remote work in your future? So now, like, as we go back to work, how many of you? Yeah, right. So that's really going to affect the way that everybody functions. Like, that's what we're hearing across the board. People are not planning to go back to work the way that they did before. So how then, for people like us that are trying to collaborate across jurisdictional boundaries, across agency lines, how are we going to do that work? Because it just got a little bit harder, right? And so because of this huge impact, we feel like it's this giant climb, right? So this is a picture of Amicalola Falls in Georgia. And this is just kind of how outreach feels all the time, right? You're you're looking up this steep stair and you're looking at a lovely, well-connected, ecosystem and community of thought. And it just feels so hard because everyone is so tired. They're tired, they're stressed, they're still living in a pandemic. And so how do you get full engagement and participation from these people that you need buy-in from during this kind of disjointed way of working and stressful situations? Because stressful situations and projects with tight deadlines, they're not going away. So of course, the first thing that we all do when we try to make this pivot to widespread, not in the same office groups, is we just throw them into a Zoom meeting, right? right? So we say, well, what do you mean? I turn my camera on and everything. That's enough. You know, it's going to be exactly the same as if we were in the same office whiteboarding. And that's obviously completely false. There's no way that that alone, that doing Zoom meetings alone is going to work. We have to have a whole strategy for outreach and engagement that leverages a set of tools, a set of strategies, and a way of thinking about your team. So we're going to talk about some of those today. And so as much as we would have liked to have done like David's doing here and hide under the covers and just grieve the loss of connection, and if we're honest, we did some of that. We did throw ourselves into the COVID work, and we showed up every day. And one of the things that you learn in projects or experiences like this, and I think you guys will agree, is broadly speaking, people are terrible, but they're also amazing. And the tough part, and that includes ourselves, but the tough part about working with people when they're under duress is all your warts come out. And so people who even maybe were really collaborative team-oriented people, they end up getting very siloed, very closed off, and kind of falling off the face of the earth. And you really, really, really need them. So it might seem like a small thing, but just one of the biggest things you can do for your team is just to make it a safe place and help them to gel as a team by talking about something that has zero pressure and is just, let's get to know each other. And it's hard to make space for that, but sometimes a good map and a survey 1, 2, 3 can really help get things kicked off. So what we did is we practiced that here, and actually NISJIC does an amazing job of practicing this, and we totally stole it from you guys. But we actually gave you that survey to fill out. So we're gonna kind of switch over to the survey for a second. So one thing that we often do is we'll ask kind of a silly question. Sometimes I like to ask about barbecue, so people start fighting right away. But we'll ask a question like this, and then we'll, and if you want to go to the map side, the data side, that'd be great. So we might have created a dashboard. We've done that a couple of times that shows responses on the fly, and we would go around to different people and we might say, and we're totally picking on you, Frank, a lot during this presentation. I hope you're ready for it. So we would say, Frank, we noticed that you want to go to Tahiti. Have you ever been there? And we might ask other people, you know, who else has been there? What did you eat? You know, what was great about it? And that gets people talking generally. It doesn't always work. Some people are reticent to speak up, but those icebreakers are a good investment in time, and the payoff is really clear. Okay, so we're going to go back to the presentation now and talk about why COVID and other projects require leadership to be kind of take the bull by the horns, so to speak. So like we said before, there's a lot of dysfunctionality in Georgia. Remember that dumpster fire flying down. So a huge percentage of our outreach is just trying to overcome those issues so that people can actually realize efficiencies and innovate together. So the bottom line is that when we started trying to get things done, it was really clear that people were not connected. They had no muscle memory for working with people that weren't inside of their office. So we had to break down those barriers really quickly because we had really tight deadlines. And when a brigadier general asks you for something, he means yesterday or 6 a.m. at the latest. And so we really needed to get all of the data flowing and all of the people talking. And that was really an important part of our day. We would have a stand-up meeting in the morning and we would get everybody together and say, you know, what's going right, what's not going right. We would have to be really picky and ask very specific questions, and people knew that that stand-up was for work, and we were all going to talk. And what was important for us was modeling that good behavior of communicating well and asking questions and making space for people to think. So remember, there wasn't time to strategize. And so we really were building the airplane in the air. That's what our General Hadopoulos would say a whole lot. Um, and so we just had to kind of go with our gut on what was the right way to move and really rely on the experts in the room, because Susan and I are not epidemiologists, and it's not appropriate for us to make certain decisions. We really needed to rely on all of the brain trust that we had, really, really smart people, much smarter than me, that were telling us, you know, you need to consider this thing, especially communications people like Dr. Amber Schmidtke, who was saying, you can't put that out without saying X, Y, and Z. And you should really change that color ramp because you're lying. So it was really important to hear those things, and we really tried to listen. So it also required a lot of bravery. And Susan mentioned this before. Transparency and building trust is about people doing what you say you're going to do and telling everybody everything that you did to get to the decision that you made, or every document, every meeting that we recorded, we would put out there and make available. So people knew exactly what was going on and how we were doing our modeling, and why we were making certain decisions on variables. We've seen that sort of transparency be misconstrued as insubordination or disloyalty. I think we all can think of some examples of that. But in the end, we had to do what was right, even if it made other people uncomfortable and put us in a politically perhaps precarious position at times. Luckily, though, doing what's right, you really do feel like you did really good work at the end of the day. And so that really kept us going. The other thing about transparency, and we have this kind of silly little GIF here about the potato. That's true in 911 to speak, so to speak, as well, because when you tell someone that there's a huge lift and tons of data that's required for them, they get really stressed out and can kind of come at you. And so, you know, it's helpful to have ways to kind of talk people through that stressful situation so you can get to something and work together, rather than just being frustrated with the situation. So again, I'm not going to get too much into the weeds on the whole NG 911 project, because we have friends tomorrow and on Friday that are going to be talking about that. But if you'd like, you can look at some of our outreach materials. You can use that QR code right there to dive in. But the bottom line that Susan already mentioned is outreach is paramount to the success of NG 911. All the tech in the world will not help you if people don't know how to help you and how to get the data that it's required, and they don't want to play in your sandbox with you. So it's really, really important that you do tons of outreach to let them, educate them, let them know what's going on, and what is required, and then lead with people that know what they're talking about. I like what Frank said on Monday at the business meeting about the ship analogy, and I think he mentioned it yesterday too, that because outreach and engagement really is about helping people to see themselves as crew members, not people that are either on a cruise with you riding along, or worse, kind of being dragged along against their will. You really want them to feel like we're all in this together, and we're going to the same place that we all want to go. So if we can approach engagement then the same way that we did with COVID. So we're going to talk about how we engaged others in some of the specifics. And the first thing we were going to talk about, I'm going to bring up Susan's analogy of the velvet bulldozer. We lovingly refer to ourselves that way. And that's part because you have to, if you want to get things done, you have to be a little bit aggressive about it, but you also have to not make people feel like you are being aggressive about it, which is really important. So we noticed that how you talk and run meetings really matters. And in other circles, The phrases and words on the screen are called conversation stayers. So they help you to, like, if you're in a difficult situation, or if you feel like you have people at the table that are maybe not seeing eye to eye, what are some ways that you can keep things moving so you can make progress? Because in a lot of things, making progress is a bunch of little conversations over time. You're not going to solve COVID, for example, the first day that we met with our team. We had to have a way to keep that conversation moving. And we also had that work of the modeling. I was leading that modeling group Scrum, and we had a lot of academic on academic violence, right? Like they were competitors, they had different modeling ideas, and they were confident that they were right. And, you know, it's just, it was really important for me. I felt so inept because I was inept. I'm not an epidemiologist and I wasn't a modeler. And here I am trying to get them to talk to each other. And so a lot of the time I just was stupid. I just embraced it and was like, I'm sorry, I don't understand how these two things are different. Or I would say things like, I think you share a value here because you're both using the same variable, you're just doing it a different way. And aren't we so thankful? Like, there's one phrase that you see a million times up there: thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing this model with us. Have I told you that lately? You both are here because you care about the people in Georgia and making sure that we can save lives. And I hope we don't lose sight of that in this moment. Like, we're so thankful for you. So in all of our projects, especially 911, when we're dealing with emergency responders, just saying thank you so much for the work that you're doing to save lives can really help to remind people of why you're really there. So the velvet matters a whole lot. It also matters to be the bulldozer. So Susan mentioned we really didn't ask for permission a lot. One thing, I'm not going to get into everything on the slide because I know we're pressed for time, but we used our platforms a whole lot to keep people engaged so that we could put things out. We wanted to publish. We wanted to be brutally honest about the situation. As long as we were telling the truth, we thought the answer should be findable outside of our office. And so we put things out there a lot. And really, being a bulldozer is just about the way that we've experienced government work in Georgia. And that is, it's not always appropriate. I just want to say that right now, but things often don't happen, not because they're not a good idea, but just because no one can decide whose job it is to say, do it. So sometimes you just do it because it's a new thing and no one's ever asked that question. And if it's the right thing to do, you do it. So we do it. There's a ton. That's right. I know you guys know. So there is so much tech in play, and man, this list is growing every day and it's really exciting. So we've talked about kind of the interpersonal skills, but this kind of just gives you an idea of all of the stuff that we tapped into on COVID and that we are tapping into with NG 911. Again, platform, just making all of those tools work for you. It might be obvious, but our tips and tricks.
Hello, testing.
Most important on those tips and tricks is publish your maps. Put the maps out there, publish the data, put it out there, even if it's not completely perfect. Just say, this is our draft map, and put it out there, and give people the opportunity to give you feedback. We've got so many survey 123s out there you wouldn't even believe. We answer every email. That is part of our weekly routine, is that when I go in and I get an email, every time we get feedback from a stakeholder or somebody fills out, I have an automated email that comes into me that says I have to go look, and I answer every single one of those. And I may not always have a good answer, but I answer it. I say, I got this email from you. I'm so sorry I don't have a good answer, but I'll work on it. And that means transparency is actually following up and making sure you do that. One of the other things that we do is we use office hours. During the NG 911 project, especially, we had this huge survey that was out there that we were getting some qualitative information about readiness on. And we had a Monday and a Friday office hours where I would just sit on Teams and I would work. And if somebody would log in and they had an opportunity to ask me a question or beat me up, which is also fine. So they would log in and say, I don't know why you think, yeah, time. So that's really important. Just being accessible to people is super important. And then finally, just make sure that you're under the guidance of your cybersecurity people. Stay connected to the people that know more about you and about how to keep your data safe so that you can do it well. I am not going to go through this slide, this show and tell on outreach in NG911 because I already gave you the link to the QR code, but feel free to go in and look at what we've built out there. And again, just publish all that stuff, and be kind to each other. So I'm going to pass it back to Susan and she'll talk about what didn't go well. See how I did that? I tell you the good news and she has to tell you the bad news.
And we don't really want to end on the bad news, but if you could go to the next slide, great. So there's lots of stuff that's still broken. We didn't fix a lot, but we feel very strongly that we were successful. And despite trying to change the world, government's still broken. We didn't fix it. There's lots of humans in state government who are risk adverse, and that is a mega huge drag. Funding is absolutely the worst. We had so many people in our state agencies who wanted to do the right thing and they wanted to throw money at solutions, and the bureaucracy prevented it. And it just made us want to jump off a cliff. State government processes still don't give you wiggle room. That was another thing, you know, everybody had to account for their time and do all these things. And it was a real challenge. Go to the next slide. So to sum up, we just want to tell you all, we know that you already do this, but be good leaders. Constantly work on your people skills, because without the humans, we're not going to be successful. Find your people, nurture them, and keep them. Harness the tech and be brave. It's going to take you far.
I was just going to say, we'll go ahead and post the results to that survey in the chat. I'll just take some screen grabs, but would encourage you guys to keep the conversation going about what worked and what didn't for you.
This was awesome. Thank you for your courage, and you're leaving the world a better place.